Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breathe Deeper. Today, I will be exploring identity, and I want to start off with this question. When people see different versions of us, including ourselves, which one is the real identity? It's not as simple as it seems, as it can be hard to distinguish between a basic identity such as name, age, physical characteristics, and a core, far more definitive identity. However, there are ways we can better understand our identity, whether through a biological, psychological, or philosophical perspective. To start off, I think it's valuable to take a look at a biological lens of identity. And to start, identity is defined as the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. But what does that mean in relation to a biological lens? Well, one such biological identity is genetic identity, which characterizes the DNA makeup of a person, which helps to create a person unique from others. But unfortunately, this definition of identity seems to lack the quality that makes it appealing to us, since we are in search of a far more profound meaning, relating to our experiences, personality, qualities, values, and beliefs. Another such way to view our identity is through neural identity, which is based on the brain's structure, memory, and consciousness. Our sense of self, according to neuroscience, arises from these networks of neurons, which encode memory, emotion, and perception. This may lead to the idea that identity is based on memories and consciousness. Then changes in brain state like brain damage or memory loss, which challenge the consistency of a permanent self, suggesting that identity may be dynamic. But the term identity usually refers to a stable, unchanging set of qualities or descriptions. Lastly, embodied identity describes our appearance, physical traits, and physiology. This definition of identity roots the essence of identity in the material world, yet identity is itself not easily explained in a tangible, physical way, but in a metaphorical, abstract manner. The paradox of change, which challenges these biological definitions of identity, returns here because even if our body changes over time due to aging, illness, or injury, we still argue that identity is still continuous. Therefore, it raises the question, can identity be both constant and changing at the same time in a technical sense? Another way to look at identity is through a psychological lens, which attempts to connect identity to the mind and its actions. One such example of looking at identity psychologically is through the work of John Locke, an English Enlightenment philosopher and physician who outlined his memory theory of personal identity in his 1689 work, An Essay Concerning Human Understanding, which suggests that a person's identity is based on the continuity of consciousness, specifically through memory. He argued that the foundation of selfhood is not based upon body and soul, but upon the ability of oneself to remember their past thoughts and actions. A second example is Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, in which the lifespan of an individual may progress through 8 stages with central conflicts that help to form personal identity and can result in the creation of new virtues. This theory elicits the idea that identity is constantly evolving in the path to shaping a coherent sense of self. A third example is role theory, also known as symbolic interactionism, which was made by the sociologist George Herbert Mead, in which it is stated that identity emerges through social interaction, in which our identity shifts depending on context. This illustrates that identity is based upon roles in social recognition rather than a simple, consistent identity. Instead, identity can be changed to fit the social situation or task that a person must perform. Finally, a philosophical exploration into identity also helps to offer more possible answers to the question of identity. One philosophical concept proposed to interpret identity is the famous statement made by the 17th century French philosopher and scientist René Descartes, which is, I think, therefore I am. The statement supposes that identity is grounded in consciousness, and thus self-awareness of the basic act of thinking and self-identification, implying in this view that identity is limited to the mind. This affirmation proves that even if everything else is doubted, the act of thinking proves the existence of the self because one must be thinking in order to doubt, implying the presence of an inner awareness that recognizes this. A second philosophical concept used to analyze identity is the paradox of the ship of Theseus. The paradox asks that a ship has to have its old parts replaced with new parts until all of the old parts have been replaced. Would it still be the same ship, or would it be a completely new one? This can be further extended if somebody took all the old parts of the ship and constructed a second ship. Then there would be two ships, with one having the old parts and one having the new parts. So which is the real ship of Theseus? This problem can be approached through the idea of the continuity of form, which would suggest that the ship with all the new parts having replaced the old parts is still the same ship because identity persists because the ship's design, purpose, and its structural pattern still exists through the replacement process. Another approach is the continuity of material, which says that identity requires the same physical substance, so once it is replaced, it is no longer the same. Therefore, according to this logic, once it is replaced, the ship of Theseus is no longer the same. A last philosophical concept used to break down identity is self-determination, and the idea that our identity is made through our choices. As said by Jean-Paul Sartre in his popular 1943 book, Being and Nothingness, Sartre states that humans are condemned to be free, meaning that we cannot escape our responsibility of self-definition through our actions, and that identity is constantly changing. This points to the conclusion that there is no predetermined true self, but instead we must construct our identity. Overall, the mystery of true identity is a far more elaborate topic than it may seem at first, and does not provide us with one easy answer, but a multifaceted, vast array of possible answers. Therefore, it is our decision to decide for ourselves through reflection and thought, and decide on our own opinion of the matter. How do you define yourself? Thank you for breathing deeper with me.